Welcome on stage for our last roundtable, Virginie Houadec and Laelia Benoit. And on our screen, remotely, Laelia Benoit and Philippe Jaffé. Good morning, good afternoon, rather.
Alors, Laelia Benoit.
Laelia Benoit, you are a student in a prestigious secondary school. You're in year 11 and you've taken part in the drafting of the Parisian Charter for Children's Rights. You were 11 years old, so you saw yesterday, you had the project yesterday, and you took part in the Climate Academy. You made a speech, you gave a speech on the children with disabilities rights at COP21. Laelia Benoit, you are a child psychiatrist, researcher associate at the Yale Child Study Center and at the CESP Research Center in Epidemiology and Health of Populations at Inserm. You currently work on eco-anxiety felt by children and teenagers, and you published in 2023 the book Infantism. Virginie Houadec, you were an inspector for the National Education Ministry, and you are a professor in sociology and education. You've coordinated the project 50 Activities for Equalities Between Boys and Girls at School. Philippe Jaffé, you are a clinic psychologist, professor at the Université de Genève. You have co-founded the Inter-University Center for Children's Rights. Philippe, the first question is for you. Could you give us a definition, your definition of the word child? A child, from a legal point of view, is a human being who's less than 18. But before everything, it's a human being, a person that deserves consideration. And it's a wonderful part of our human life. We heard children speaking before this roundtable, and they were telling each other wonderful things. They are the most curious, less self-centered people in our society. Laelia Benoit, Philippe Jaffé, Virginie Houadec, you are all strongly engaged in causes that are representing a big challenge for children's future. So why childhood and why this engagement? Who wants to start? Laelia? So why childhood and why children? Well, I think it's a way of betting on our future. It's a way of remaining optimistic, to see that amongst us there are people who have their future ahead, and we want to share what is best in the hope that there's a bit of optimism in humanity. Philippe, yes, go for it. I would adopt a different bias. I think it's a feeling of indignation that has motivated me a lot. When you're a child, you're being told to shut up and eat your soup. You're not allowed to speak. And in my mind, to engage, to commit for children was a way of freeing them in a society where we consider their role better. And on a personal basis, I was directly affected by a situation that provoked sufferings where parents would tear each other apart. So there's a need for me to help children enter life in a more harmonious, conditions. Virginie? Well, I'm now retired and happily retired, but in the past I was a teacher in public schools, then career guidance counselor, then worked as an inspector. I wrote a thesis on youth literature, but what fascinates me is listening to children. Even today, when I see a small group of children in a park, I sit by them and I listen to what they are talking about. I find that their vision of the world is adorable. I love thinking about how they are imagining strategies, and I think that they're incredibly intelligent.
Donc, cette table ronde va s'intéresser à demain. Donc,
this roundtable is about our future, what is happening tomorrow. And when we talk about children and the future in one sentence, people start feeling a bit tense. Nailem, do you trust the future? Well, yes and no. I am confident because I feel that the people my age, older ones, they are engaged, they are leading strong actions, and since they're tomorrow's adults, maybe we'll change things better, faster. But I don't trust today's adults because they are just not acting properly. They say lots of things, use great words, organize big meetings, but we don't see many things changing at our level. So I don't trust them, but I trust us. We're going to try and remain as humble as possible and try for it not to be another useless meeting. It's a promise. It's not a promise. We're going to try. On a personal level, are you worried about the future? Are you also uncertain about the future as adults and teenagers? Laelia, did you want to say a few words? I work a lot on climate change and the impact on children and teenagers. And the state of our planet and the environment is a source of concern and an emergency. And the way we don't listen to children's needs in this particular context is something that worries me, even more so than the environmental situation, because you can do a lot when you're facing a challenge. And the fact that we're not listening to teenagers' distress concerns the fact that we tend to ridicule them, to humiliate them when they start expressing themselves on those issues. The fact that it's not our priority that they have a good future, that's a source of concern for me. And like Hélène, or Nailem rather, I feel that adults' position is a source of concern. Philippe, Virginie? Well, I must say that I agree with Nailem. Take part in many big meetings at the UN, and they usually don't bring results. And what I find extraordinary is that through this you can meet extraordinary children. They're a source of inspiration. But not only, they encourage me to try and change things in a different way, to have political practices evolve and support children as well. It's not simple. Often children don't have a seat around the table, and we fight for this. A few years ago, an example, there was a big conference on the eradication of child labor around the world, but not one child had been invited to this meeting. It's extraordinary. You can talk about something that concerns them directly, and you don't have them as experts. So those extraordinary children, they exist. There are many of them, and in that regard, I am confident and have more and more confidence, since I can see that the old and stupid adults are going to slowly disappear and retire. I'd like to talk about the young adults. There are many of them around me, and I trust them more. We talked about it in the previous roundtable. We can see that there's a critical mind that is very sharp amongst those young adults. Very interesting. Which gives me confidence. I trust them. A few weeks ago, there was a debate on AI, ChatGPT, etc. And I realized that people my generation, they struggle understanding what it is, having a representation of it. Adults know how to use it. They know how to detect fake news. They have a much more precise knowledge of this than us. But I'm happy that you remain optimistic. I'm telling you, Philippe and Laelia, because you're just joining us in this conference, but we've been talking about childhood and children for the past 2 days. And apart from this roundtable, since Nailem is part of the panel, we haven't heard children in person. We only have 3 guests who were recorded and answered questions that we asked them. And we're going to listen to an extract of how they perceive the planet's future. I'm wondering what we need a planet to the Earth to live on. Is it going to get better, or are presidents, politicians not going to take care of it? So is it going to be worse and worse? I'm wondering if people are going to start taking this into account. What do you think about Earth? How is it going to be in the future? Well, it's going to be worse in the future. I think it's going to get worse because human beings are not taking care of nature. There's more and more waste in nature. I think it's going to get better because there are more and more children who are taking care of nature because of protests, etc. I think it's going to be slightly better because we are taking care of it. I take care of nature because I quite often pick up waste when I see some. Maybe the adults of today, when they were children, we didn't tell them to take care of the earth. And we are being told that we need to take care of nature. And maybe when we get older, we do the same with our children and grandchildren. So we hope that it will get better. Nailem, do you relate to this? Do you feel concerned by eco-anxiety? Are you worried about the future of our planet? Yes, because quite often we're being told about rich countries, poor countries. We see that rich countries are polluting a lot, and it's not necessarily in those countries that we're going to act, but in other, or that the climate change is going to have an impact. More often it's going to be in countries where there are droughts, floods, etc. And I feel concerned by this, and there are actions taking place in schools so that we can plant new trees or other activities. But yes, I'm necessarily concerned by this. The feeling of eco-anxiety that you've been working on, Laelia and Laelia Benoit, you've been working on. Could you tell us more about this new term of eco-anxiety that we start hearing more and more? Eco-anxiety is not just about anxiety. It's a set of emotions that you may feel when you observe climate damages, it could be about anxiety, anger, indignation, mentioned by Philip earlier. It can be shame as well. Feel ashamed that you can't act as much as you'd like, or positive emotions such as the desire to act or hope. So it might not be the perfect words, eco-anxiety. It's all about the emotional disruptions that you might feel. And it's not a disease at all. It's a human healthy reaction that shows that we've understood the situation, that we feel empathy for the world around us, and it's going to lead us to action. One last thing, eco-anxiety is increasing when governments are not dealing with climate emergency. Scientific study published in the Lancet journal showed that the more populations feel that their governments are not dealing with the issue, the more they're feeling eco-anxiety. So just to say that it is a healthy collective feeling, emotion in the face of a very real problem. The more we are aware of it, the more it will have a beneficial impact on Earth. Do you want to react to this word, Philip? I think that it was a very relevant description of what it is, and I like that you are adding this positive aspect of the term, because anxiety doesn't necessarily refer to positive emotion. It's not just about this. When you talk about eco-empathy, might be a bit of an exaggeration, but it's a way of being aware of what is happening under our eyes. It's the expression of a sort of realism felt by young people, children. Now, what I find preoccupying, and the perverse effect of this, is that children develop this feeling, this anxiety, because they feel that there's a lack of awareness, a lack of action from adults, from the system as a whole. And so they feel responsible for this need to take action themselves, to get their hands dirty themselves. And in a way, we're preventing them from fully experiencing childhood, this beautiful time of life. And I never grew up, I don't know about you, but never grew up with the idea that if I'm more responsible sooner, then my life will be shortened. I always felt that I would have an endless life, and that it won't end earlier, because the world is indeed being polluted very rapidly. And Laelia reminded us of how entire islands are disappearing, autochthonous populations that are disappearing and suffering terribly. Many children across the world are living on a daily basis, experiencing the impact of our Western way of life. You can also feel empathy when you live in a rich country for poor countries, and as you know, there's a movement around the world that is looking at mobilizing resources in favor of the planet's common good. But Nailem is going to answer that there are big meetings that might be useless, but I hope that there's still a glimpse of hope. What I find interesting in the testimonies that we just heard, and they feel responsible in a way already, and we are stealing their childhood by doing so, by bringing those responsibilities. And there's a child who said that it was because of the protests, and I thought that was interesting, but because that child feel that there's the need to act at a collective level to react. I think that the child talked about protest as a solution, so it might be a bit of a utopia, but she still had this sense of the collective level. The first part of the roundtable is going to focus quite a bit on what is not as joyous, not as happy, and then we'll talk about the solutions and the energy we can invest in more positive aspects. And I've asked our three guests if, according to them, boys and girls are equal. Before, it wasn't the case, but they are more and more equal, but I think not enough. And you girls? Can you repeat the question? Do you feel that boys and girls are equal? Well, I don't think so, because there are differences. What are the differences? I don't know anymore. Are there differences between boys and girls? None, and I think that they're equal. Because I think that they should be allowed to have what they want, to choose what they want. Before, boys were not allowed to wear dresses and skirts, and girls were not allowed to wear trousers. They had to wear skirts and dresses. And nowadays, now they have the right. And that's a good thing to have the right? Yes, that's a good thing, because I don't really like dresses and skirts. I don't really like them very much. That's why. Virginie Houadec, you're working on boys and girls equality. Gender stereotypes are very much present in our societies and hence in children's daily lives at school. Do you feel that there have been some improvements since the beginning of your engagement? What can you tell us about this gender equality nowadays? Are they right, these little girls? One of them says, yes, there's an equality between boys and girls. What I notice is that there have been improvements, there have been reverse movements and stagnations. My job was to go to classrooms, observe teachers and pupils learning, and I've always observed the same thing in maths, in primary school, and that's a real stereotype, what I'm going to tell you about. But when a teacher needs to emit an assumption, so for instance, when you're learning how to divide, the teacher's bringing a bag of sweets and says, how many sweets am I going to divide amongst you? And spontaneously, without realizing it, the teacher is going to turn to a boy. And when a teacher needs a reminder, a summary, they're going to turn to girls. We made an experiment with some of my interns when we were writing down questions so that we can reverse the stereotype. At some point, the girls we were asking about issuing an assumption, they had a bit of a pause before answering because they thought that the question wasn't addressed to them. 13 years later, when they have to go to school, and after 16 years old, this triggers learnings. And we had worked with my previous research group at the University of Toulouse called Gender and Education with Véronique Lisange, Joseph Coste. We saw that in maths, statisticians are usually female statisticians because They have those skills in maths that are much stronger, and for boys, they usually to what we used to call in my time pure maths. And I still see it happening in classrooms. And I'm referring to the previous roundtable where Laurence Le Guen was saying that teachers are not trained in photography. Where here again, we could say that training teachers, or the initial training for teachers, is not focusing enough on these types of observations, and they're starting to be old ones. Those observations were shared in the 90s already. We want girls to study science more, but let's train teachers as well on those issues. And then where I feel that there is an improvement, that it's evolving, in primary school, we have a list of reference literature, youth literature books. The first list, published in 2002, was full of stereotypes. We had 70% of male characters with 30% of female characters. The female characters didn't pass the Bechdel test that we all know about. They never scored more than 2. There were never more than 2 female characters in a book, and whenever there were ones, they were talking about a boy, a man. So we became aware of this issue, and in the reference list of the Ministry of Education, there are female characters, such as Ruby Tête Haute, Brindille. They are courageous girls, and they give a beautiful idea of what you can do as a girl. Regarding being able to take some, rather the reverse movement for teachers. There are curriculums for teachers, and I feel that the curriculums have stopped addressing these issues. In 2007, in the Ministry of Education's curriculum, it was written, and I'm forgetting the exact sentence, but it says that gender equality should be the main goal. It wasn't exactly the specific sentence, but that was the meaning of it. And today, in curriculums, it feels that it's more a type of aesthetics. We've added in certain parts, we're going to have gender equality in mind. What does it mean in sports, for instance, to have gender equality in mind? Teachers need tools, and there's only one part of the curriculum for primary schools where teachers have indications, and so they implement them. For history, and we ask teachers to talk about powerful women. And we talk about Anne de Bretagne, Isabeau de Bavière, Mary de Médicis, and it's part of the curriculum. So the teachers are talking about it. And I find that here we are pedaling back, and it's affecting teachers' training and the curriculum.
Nailem, what do you think about this? Is this gender equality issue one of your preoccupation? Yes, of course. For us in high school, we have to choose what we want to do in the future. And for example, in medicine, even though we want it, but we have the tendency to think that nurses can only be women, and the same case for midwives, and in fact it is called midwives, and it's not for men. And for engineers or engineering careers, it's much more like for boys. And if you, even though you go and you want to be that, you're in a class with the majority of boys, so you feel uncomfortable. And if we have the feeling that it's going better, in fact, no, there's still a lot of difference between boys and girls. Yes, absolutely, quite well observed. But also between adults and children, Laelia Benoit, could you tell us what you mean by infantism, which is the title of your last book? Yes, thank you. Well, I would have a lot to say regarding what has just been said, but infantism, what I call infantism, is the whole of prejudices against children, as Philippe said, understood as below 18. So infantism is a form of ageism, which is a discrimination connected to age, but it's important to talk about the discrimination against young people, because when we talk about ageism in France, we think about ageism in France. It's more like against old people or the elderly. And we're not comfortable with aging bodies, for example. But we so not consider young children and teenagers that we don't even consider in terms of ageism. So this is why I created the word infantism. And so this could be connected to personal motives. So, for example, if I was humiliated as a child, when I'm older, then I keep the idea that childhood is a period full of shame, and I will keep repeating this kind of behaviors. So these are the individual aspects of this repetition, but there's also a more collective aspect, sociological aspect. So, which is to consider the group of children as a real group, which is a minority, has fewer rights than other groups, that is more oppressed, has less power, and in fact, they're considered a bit like women, talking about gender equality. Even though the women represent half of the population, they're still a minority because they have less power. And we could also consider ethnic minorities and gender minorities. So people below under 18 are also a minority group because they're dominated by another group. And we have to face this, and we have to realize how through in our daily behaviors we just continue this situation of domination against children and contribute to the status quo. Well, do you think that we are in a systemic infantism? Yes, absolutely, which is typical of cultures, meaning that it's a cultural thing, it's a collective aspect. So we have rules, collective rules against children, but it's also something we keep repeating on an everyday basis in our behaviors. So policies that do not help children becoming adults with full rights in education, in health, not valorizing all the careers connected to childhood, so teachers or everyone who's working with children, but also not giving enough time to parents to take care of their children, not taking care of the environment, i.e. leaving a planet, an Earth that is not going to be suitable for future generations. So the idea is here that the children are submitted to a number of humiliations. So this is one thing to be understood. Infantism doesn't mean that there are kids that are well treated, that enjoy good conditions. No. And on the other hand, ill-treated children. No. Infantism is a group that is submitted to a number of humiliations, just like sexism. You could say there's only a few women that are ill-treated and beaten up by the partners or others. But no, people would say, no, not everything is going fine. We need to make sure that the women are well treated everywhere, not only in their daily lives. It's the same thing for infantism. Some children are ill-treated, but the whole group is ill-treated as a whole. And so we need to move further and improve in that respect in our countries. Philippe, what do you think? Well, being the only man in this panel, I feel like in a dangerous territory, but I think that's very interesting because we need to solve this issue, which is two opposed groups. But regarding discrimination, of course, there is a gender inequality. We're still biased, and it's hard to get rid of all these bad habits. The day we speak about the toy trucks of Laelia and the dolls of Philippe, we will have moved forward. But I think this period now is very interesting. Some political groups are worried about gender fluidity, about transgender identities, and I think that I have the feeling that young people are just making fun of adults, saying we don't do this kind of differences, we don't apply these discriminations. Even though some young people are faced with something very difficult. And regarding power, of course, the power is of the essence. We realize that kids don't have a lot of power. And these changes, if we want to change this, it's not going to be easy. In our jargon, regarding children's rights, we talk about evolutive power of the children. So it sometimes they acquire power little by little, progressively. And so the challenge for our society is to realize that they are acquiring power skills, and maybe for adults to step back, because these young people have the keys to their own existence, and they can help us understand the way they will behave. So, but this is difficult to change, and of course, it is there's a political aspect to it. And just to conclude, I see that in Scandinavian countries, the role of women has changed a lot, and in my country, in Switzerland, it has changed a lot. But even though it has moved forward, it's still not the same, and women are still not paid the same, and they're still abused physically. And so I hope we're on the right path. Virginie, did you want to say something? Yes. I wanted to react to what Laelia was saying about the power of young people, of children. When I was in Toulouse, in the Mirail, which is a difficult geographic area, and we had decided to create children councils in schools, and so they could discuss anything they wanted about the school's organization. And I had been closely connected to these councils. There was one child being a president. Every role was held by children. Only the one reporting was an adult, taking notes of what was going on. And the first meetings were always very surprising because children didn't understand that they were left the power to decide how they would organize themselves. So, for example, breaks and other parts of the school organization. And little by little, they understood how they could use the power they were given. And in all schools, there were two particular issues. So one was sharing the space of the courtyard between girls and boys, because boys were playing soccer and girls were pushed away from the courtyard and just on the border, and they couldn't do much. And the second thing was the toilets being clean. And in all children councils, I did others in the rest of my career, but every time you let children express themselves on the school's organization is the way the culture is divided and the toilets being clean. Yeah, I think this is probably fundamental rights. Laelia, what would you... Sorry. Nailem, what do you think should change for you to be more listened to and would change in the future? Well, first of all, when we're asked to say what we think, not just say, okay, we'll do it, but really do it. Do it for real and show us that we're taken into consideration, and we might be children, yes, but we have good ideas and we can change the world, even though it's not at global level, but in at the district level, and for schools to take differences into consideration, because we often say that schools are okay for all kinds of students, whether they be impaired or not. But when you look closely, these schools are not adapted to people with disabilities. That they have put an elevator in our school, but it's only for the ground floor to the first floor, so it's just useless, because if they need to go higher, they can't do that. So we should take everyone into consideration, and especially children. What do you think about this notion of infantism that Laelia talked about? Well, I think that very often we're much less taken into consideration, and adults, even though they don't show it, sometimes they make fun of us when we suggest things. They think, okay, they don't understand the challenges that are connected to these issues. They don't realize the real situation. But we live this situation much more than the people in position of power, because the president in his house doesn't see what is happening in the different areas in cities. And so listening to children is something really important, because very often they say that we're badly behaved, we're just riffraff, but no, we just are young people who need to be helped. We often say that we put a lot of weight on children's shoulders with the hope that children or young people will do better than we did. Do you feel that weight? Yes, absolutely. As you were saying, we have the feeling that we have to to grow quicker than we should, and it's a part of our innocence that is taken away from us. Okay, because in the playground we talk about politics instead of talking about things our age, and we don't have any answers. We're also just invisible in society. We just understand things very well. And the more we grow old, we ask ourselves questions, but very often we don't have the answers. Well, I'd planned a lot of questions to ask you, but the time flies, so I'm going to go directly to one of the solutions you're suggesting, Laelia Benoit. You're talking in your book, Infantism, you're talking about children's right to vote. Could you develop that? Yes, and I'm going to try and make a transition with what has just been said. Giving children too much responsibilities, youth is going to be robbed. When they are given more responsibilities, it's not more power. It's not giving them more power. It's just more responsibilities. And when you're given more responsibilities, you feel powerless. What is terrible is not responsibilities themselves, is this feeling of powerlessness. And so if you give more power, if we empower children, the issue of responsibilities will weigh less because they will choose whatever they want for themselves. So in my book, I'm just saying that I wanted to vote, and when I was 7, because I developed a strong interest in politics at the age of 7, and so I was just as interested. I'm not sure adults would have understood or were as interested as I was when I was 7. Is an adult with the right to vote is an adult that understands things better than me, and it's not something that is measured. We don't take tests to enable the right to vote. No. So this is what I speak about in my book. Is I think we should give the right to vote to all children since the day they were born. Of course, it's something to make people react. But why not? What would be the obstacles? We could say, on the one hand, okay, but children are not mature enough, they don't understand things properly, so someone else would have to vote for them. Yes, it is true. Until the age of 6 or 7, they're probably going to vote like their parents. But even after that, it would be the children will be influenced. And hopefully in a constructive way. But why not? If we look at the elderly, some old people vote, give a proxy, and so to someone, and even though their cognitive abilities are very much diminished, even though they suffer from an Alzheimer, so we consider that we can't give the right to vote away from them, and so someone in their family is going to be given the proxy to vote for these people. And yet, the person taking care of these people will develop things that are good for this elderly person, but so maybe it's giving more money to the people accompanying them. But the same questions are not asked for children. So from 0 to 18 years old, everyone who's helping kids grow up, and the kids themselves or the children themselves don't have any voice to be. Nothing to be. They can't express themselves. So we could imagine this right to vote, which would be the exact reverse situation from what we have today. It would be from 18, no one has the right to vote instead of me. And so that's a bit different. And maybe when you're 6, 8, 10, when you're a teenager, this growing child would have more and more freedom in their choice as they gain more skills. So maybe they will be assisted with the help of people in schools, with their parents, and maybe give a voice to this group of the population that is still very much silent. Philippe, are you in favor of the right to vote for children? Yes, in favor, but I could say, I could repeat the exact same words that Laelia said. I think we should not exclude children from the rights to vote. We vote in Switzerland every 3 months on referendums, etc. And so it would be a great idea so that for communities, so that everyone could vote. And Laelia has underlined the most important thing is that the people in charge of a family would benefit from having an extra voice if children could vote, so they could express their opinion. But if I go back on the legal aspect of things, it's part of the Convention on Children's Rights. And it's true in France, they have the right to express their opinion, and they require adults to take this into account. And this particular point is a bit more tricky. Is this how are we going to implement this when we, well, again, is going back to the issue of power, and adults have a hard time relinquishing this power. But I think that things are changing also in this field. We were talking earlier, the kids were talking about protests, and I think it's being blight to think that children are going to stay put, looking at what is going to happen in the coming years. But no, they're gathering, they're taking action, they actually might prepare a revolution. So we should be prepared before we're actually swept by this possible revolution. And I think some events are showing that they're taking very convincing actions. Virginie, yes, I think that I haven't thought about the right to vote, so I couldn't say anything on it. But I think school has a role to play, and children have a lot to say on the way the school is organized. And I think it would be a very nice learning experience. And I think just choosing between a pancake with sugar or pancake with chocolate is already something very important. And in terms of organization, we just the mere fact of being born should entitle to a room in creches, and we should have public services dedicated to very young children. They should be paid adequately and be trained properly. And I think that would. I think it's not a utopia. It's not an idealistic. It's just a real thing. I think just the fact of being born should entitle you to be taken in a crash, and that would probably help your professional future, probably decrease salary inequalities, and have a real public service dedicated to young children.
When we were preparing this roundtable, you talked about end of life, phrase that is quite often used, and we don't really hear the opposite in the media. Beginning of life. It's not really a period of time that is considered a lot. So it would be interesting to have it being addressed, maybe not necessarily as a priority, but at least mentioning it. But it could be great if it was a priority. Nailem, would you like a right to vote? I think we need several categories of vote, because I think that to vote for presidential elections, it's not necessarily very useful for us, because it would mean that we have to grow up faster, would have to choose if we're rather right-wing, left-wing, or center. And we tend to choose what our parents think or what our friends think. Then it wouldn't be our choice. But what would be interesting would to vote actions, and regardless of the president will have to roll out those actions regardless of the party they are affiliated with. So it should be rolled out by the president, and we could be consulted, a right to consultation. As Virginie said, we could be consulted on budgets at school or certain play areas. Might not be a right to vote, but a consultation at least, and depending on the vote, then the final choice will be redirected. But for presidential elections, I would say no, I don't think it's useful. We can hear you. Yes, Philip. She put her finger on something. It's true that adults are very good at listening, but usually they listen and then they forget about it. So yes, we need to consult children, but what do we do with this afterwards? I feel that with consultation, we have to analyze this particular action. In Amsterdam, with more than 1 million inhabitants, they have organized children's councils, and the children are electing a vice mayor. The vice mayor has a program that is dedicated to children with a budget attached to it. They can spend, he or she can spend it with the help of children, a consultation of children. So the children can be consulted, and the mayor must consult children on a regular basis, the children who live in Amsterdam, and then take their requests into account. So, of course, there are still inequalities, but I find that there are pragmatic approaches that are interesting. And once again, in Switzerland, we vote all the time. As I said earlier, is there going to be a summertime? Is there going to be an increase of pensions? Are shops going to be open from 5 to 6 on Sundays or not at all? So things that matter but many children don't relate to those issues. And what matters, on top of all, is to address issues they're interested in and that they'd like to have more control on, so that that can improve their lives and their daily lives, more particularly. Just to answer the question on the right type of elections children should vote for, I feel that we tend to approach this issue from the wrong end. For instance, the electoral system in France is not well designed. Lots of people are very unsatisfied that they have to choose one candidate when they would prefer voting for a set of measures, because it's quite rare that they agree with one candidate. So a system that is fairer would be Switzerland. It's not because we need to rethink our electoral system in France that we shouldn't think about children's role in a potential vote in elections. And there are different types of elections. We have regional elections, etc. But this can evolve, because yes, one of the problems that I identify is the fact that we have to vote for one person in particular. Nailem, you did mention the local level, so yeah, that could be a good start. We are going to conclude this roundtable by listening to our three guests, who are going to give us their opinion on the right to vote for children. I don't think I'm in favor. I think it's only for adults, but maybe, I don't know, actually. Well, I guess yes, because if they vote in classrooms, they can also vote for the president, right? I think that they should, because it's good that children have a choice and that their choice matters, because most of the time we don't know what is happening at all. We don't know what presidents are going to say. If children voted, then maybe something would be better. We're going to conclude on this. Thank you very much. Thank you, Laelia. Thank you, Philippe. Thank you, Virginie. Thank you, Nailem. We're going to allow the audience to ask questions.
Est-ce qu'il y a des questions? Il y en a une là-haut.
Oui, bonjour. Alors, il y a une question qui va être posée en anglais.
A question being asked in English, and I'll do my best to translate the question with my English level. There are headsets, though.
About the co-creation process in the museum with the children to help co-create the installations. And I know that some of the argument that comes against that in schools is that there's not enough time to dedicate the children to this co-creation process because it keeps them away from their studies. Which is interesting, because I can't think of anything more important than for children to co-create with adults, because both parties learn in the process. So I was wondering, do we see a time when co-creating between the generations could be a regular part of the curriculum within the school system?
Alors, est-ce qu'il y a besoin d'une traduction?
Do we need translation, because there are headsets, but we don't necessarily have suggested people to grab a headset beforehand. So Laelia will translate. A question on museum installations, or reference to museum installations, and part of the word could be to invite children to co-design museography with adults. And one of the arguments that had been opposed to this type of activity would mean that it wouldn't allow pupils to spend more time at school, and they have less time to cover the school curriculum. And by the way, that's the reason why the speakers, the guests that were recorded, and that's me, I doing this, they couldn't be here in person because they're at school right now, and I'm wondering, wouldn't it have been interesting to have them in person here rather than being recorded? But that's part of my answer regarding this question. And the question was also on our culture. What do we consider a learning? What do we perceive as time that is not dedicated to learning? But my question is that, yes, collective projects and collaboration should be part of our learning process. That's how you learn how to work as a team. That's how you're going to become an effective adult, both at work and in your community, in your neighborhood, in your family. So I fully agree with this. The only nuance that I would like to add in my answer, I feel that in France, we still strongly believe that learning is about a theoretical content and not necessarily practical one. It's evolving, it's changing, but we feel that we have to cover the curriculum in a very vertical way to teach a child who listens and who must learn things by heart rather than using creative methods. It's very much top-down rather than bottom-up. And secondly, time is money. Time means that you need professionals who are going to accompany children, be with children, and the more freedom children have so that they can express themselves, create, think, the more we need adults who are guaranteeing that there is a safe framework for this learning process. It represents time, preparation, and time is money, professionals that we have to pay, more teachers that must be better paid. And here again, we're referring to politics that are a form of infantism that are now placing children at the heart of our society. Would you like to add something? Yes, I'd like to add that it's actually referring to Article 1 of the Code of Education, which is here. And it says that school is a state priority, a national priority, and all children are sharing a capacity to learn and progress in cooperation. And I think we tend to forget this particular word, cooperation, way too much in the French school system. And that's more of a concept for young children. Another question? Good afternoon. Very interesting part on solutions. I thought that what you talked about on the right to vote for children, I thought that was very interesting. I had never thought about it. I'd like to comment on what you said regarding the sort of despise that adults have, what we talked about regarding infantism. Would you have solutions in mind that are not necessarily addressed to children, give more powers to children, but how can we change adults as well? What can we implement so that children are less there is less infantism? There are some clues in the book. First of all, emotional alphabetization, emotional literacy, so that adults recognize their emotions. When you have a child in front of you who asks to have a space, a child who is asking for it, but is using a mix of emotions, anger, frustration. So the message is not going to be very clear for us as an adult to interpret. And quite often what happens is that as adults, we have been educated so that we remain silent, we don't speak, and so we're going to be bothered by that child who speaks up, who makes noise, who is mixing a request with a bit of distress, an emotion that hasn't been digested yet. And so our reaction to this is going to be discomfort. We want it to stop straight away. Peace, silence, straight away. We saw debates last year, and we had people saying, you send children to their rooms, time out, and you take a breather. But if we were able to deal better with our discomfort, we'd understand that that's a child that is showing distress, lots of emotions that are arising. We're going to try and identify what is happening. Maybe you feel frustration because of this. Maybe you're angry. We're going to take a bit of time to breathe. And together, we're going to discuss what you would like. And maybe amongst the things that you would like, some of them are possible. Others that can be possible, but they're not desirable. Why? Why not? We're going to take some time to exchange about this. Doesn't mean that the child is going to obtain whatever they want straight away, but as adults, because we've identified our emotion, the fact that we have some discomfort, we need time to breathe. We're not going to have an immediate reaction of oppression. The more we know our emotions, we regulate them, the more we help our children to regulate, to balance their emotions and exchange with them in a constructive manner. That's one thing. Another thing, as adults, to better help children, we need to recognize that there's a work to do as an adult, as a parent, a work of education, and actually it's very tiring. And that's one of the reasons why people always bicker about well-intentioned education, etc. It's tiring to discuss this. We have a problem, but the problem is not because of children. The children are not responsible. They're just children. They're just growing up. So the problem when you educate a child, you support the child. It takes time. It takes energy. And so there's a part in the book that talks about the recognition of this type of work. Support children. Stop of imposing this rule as well of having children. If we don't want to have children, we can not have children so that we avoid feeling that it's an imposition and that can lead to burnout. So talk about this emotional literacy and understand that this is a work that we're doing when we educate. Those are two clues in my book. The Laelia Benoit's book, Infantism, is at the Cité des Sciences et de l'Industries bookstore if you want to read it. Good afternoon. Thank you for your discussion, and more particularly Laelia and Nailem. This has moved me, and this is making me change what I think about the right to vote for children. I thought I was open-minded, but actually I realized that I'm not very much open-minded. So I felt very much disrupted by your intervention, your comments. A question to Virginie, who spent a lot of time in national education. Well done. Congratulations. There are educational methods that exist, like Montessori or Freinet. Montessori method is more than 100 years old today, and it gives more freedom, autonomy, choice to children in their activities. It promotes self-correction, and I find it very interesting. However, this method quite often is applied by private schools that are extremely expensive, that are not accessible for lots of citizens. There's a big debate between public and private education. I'm not going to comment on this. You've all heard about this debate, but I was wondering why those educational methods are not more present in public schools. Why aren't they not as much used in public schools? There are Freinet public schools, maybe not Montessori ones, but they are Freinet public schools. I taught for the first 5 years of my career in Freinet public school. You must know that Freinet hated Maria Montessori. He hated her. There are texts written by Freinet where he heavily criticizes Montessori's educational methods. He said that it was a way of educating children so that they become good servants.
So here we're talking about, again, the way teachers are trained. When I started teaching, it was lucky enough because we were given 3 years. We had a 3-year training session, so we had classes at the École Normale, and then internships with confirmed professors, and then classes with students and confirmed teachers. And this is when I had the opportunity to go to a Freinet school, and I found it very interesting. And you're going to say that I'm rumbling, but I think that training is of the essence. We need to train our teachers much more, and nowadays the young teachers are not told anything about Freinet. They hear more about Montessori because she has developed a number of tools for children. I can't remember who's publishing or who's manufacturing these tools, but I remember in my own time I had testimonies from children who went to Montessori schools, and I could hear that children in Montessori schools didn't learn how to read over a period of 3 years after they had first entered the school. I thought that was a bit strange. And then there's another issue, which is the freedom left to teachers in what they teach. I think that this is absolutely precious, and we need to leave the teachers the freedom to write their methods, the school books. I think that is absolutely crucial, according to me. I don't know if I answered your question. As Laelia Benoit was saying earlier, it's also maybe the profession of teachers is to be considered as well. Yes, if I could add something, we need to talk about budget. Of course, if you have the budget but you're not trained and you don't have the appropriate approach to a child, then it doesn't work. Even though you have an unlimited budget, if you don't have the right approach. But you also have to consider that one common thing between Montessori and Freinet learning methods is to respect the children's rhythms. You're talking about toilets, we're talking about children, and then no one wants to go to the loo at the same time. And so it's something in French classes, in French schools, they cannot go to the toilets at this. When they want, they have to all go at the same time. And alternative learning methods would tell you, yes, no, it is possible, and it's a nice way of respecting the natural rhythms of the children. How would you feel in your own work if you couldn't go to the bathroom when you wanted? I think that you'd find it a bit strict, and so we would need to leave our kids have more freedom. But even though when teachers are well trained, even though children understand that they can go to the toilet when they want and then they come back and sit again in schools, there's a point when it's not possible anymore. When they have 30 children in your class that you need to teach, you can't do that, even though you're willing to do it. So we need to have appropriate means for classes, and it's a question of priority in budgets. Yes, absolutely, I agree with you. Classes with 30 children, unfortunately, is not very often the case. I think the average number of children in a class in France is usually around 19. I saw that change, and I can tell you that in schools that I visited, I realized that teachers leave the children go to the toilets when they want, but only one child is allowed at a time. So whenever a child raises their hands and want to go to the toilet, they look around to see if all the other children are present in the class, and then they can go. And I think this has been changed by a law, and I think it's the 2013 law by Vincent Payon, and that enables us to welcome in a nursery school children that are in diapers again still. And usually it's a matter of 2 weeks, and then they learn. They learn how to go to the toilet. So I think this is an example of a positive change. Yes, thank God. Thank God. It's my figures are outdated, and of course I don't have the exact figures. No, but we agree. I think we agree. Right. So let's take another question.
On a 2 ou 3 questions grand max. Si c'est des questions rapides et des réponses pas trop longues. Il y a toute une petite organisation de questions. Je vous explique pour
Okay, Laelia, Philippe, you're not there in the room. We're not with us in the room, but we're trying to organize the questions in the room. Thank you very much for this very interesting discussion. And this is raising a number of questions, because we talked about children on the one hand, adults on the other hand. And there was a first question on co-creation and how to do it together. But there's different initiatives. There's the UNICEF youth consultation that started for the young people below 18. There's the school councils at the scale of for cities, but also for schools. And then young people can express themselves and they're listened to. But if you don't work in these youth organizations, if you're not a parent, you have no idea of what comes out of these consultation methods, and we don't know what is implemented afterwards to solve these issues. And then adults are worried. And if we don't work together, there's a lot of anxiety. I think there's a lack of dialogue between young adults and adults that are a bit older. And so I think that thinking together is less developed than consultation initiatives. And I think adults could learn a lot from younger children. because some of these ideas can really change things much more than what our adults' imaginations can figure.
Merci pour cette intervention. Est-ce que quelqu'un veut réagir?
Moi, je veux bien.
Naïlem?
Moi, je me souviens que quand j'avais...
I remember that when I had to draft the Parisian Charter for Children, what came up to our minds was to create a council for members of parliament, but children members of parliament. So we would elect children representatives for each district, a child, and then we would then create our laws. We would ask these children members of parliament to create our laws, and then we had not gone that much further, but we thought that maybe this council would think together and have all the children vote and maybe be part of other voting moments, because we don't know what these regional councils do, and so I think it's a very good idea. But if we don't have any, if we don't hear about that in our neighborhoods, then it's no use.
Une question juste devant.
Alors, une remarque avant la...
Right, I want to make a comment first before I ask a question. In all these children workshops I could be part of as an observer, there are some children who are quite mature, but some children who are young cannot be part of these consultation groups, because even though they're mature enough.
Je sais que vous consacrez une dizaine.
And this is I have a question of Laelia. So you spend time on different actions. Sorry, it's not a question for Nailem, and I know you take part of these groups, and you don't ask your school, and I know you do that. And why is it so important? But I'm only your mom. Well, it's important for me to be part of these projects because very often children are labeled unable to do this, not intelligent enough to do that. And so I would like to break those categories. And as children, I want to show, as a child, I want to show that we are just as capable as adults and we have just as bright ideas as adults. And if adults took time to listen to us, we could organize really interesting debates. We have debates in school, but I think we should have debates mixed debates with adults and children. Because the debates that are organized is, do you prefer pain au chocolat or chocolatine? Well, we're not interested in that kind of debate. So who's interested in that? Even though we're 12 years old, we would never organize this kind of debate. So I'd like to be part of real debates where we're taken seriously, because this shows that we're not taken seriously. And so this is important to me. And even though we don't talk about it, we have eyes to see, and we've realized that we're not taken into consideration. And when I was part of the Climate Academy, there were delegations from 22 different countries, children from Russia, Ukraine, and we realized that even though there were wars in the world, these children were impacted by that, because the Russian and Ukrainian children were best friends, and so they weren't impacted. And so we just wanted to say to the adults, look, you have divided the world in countries, but we don't care about these differences. We're just friends, and we are all together. And I can see these initiatives are very interesting to me because I feel I'm not alone, and someone is actually correcting me. A 6-year-old is correcting me, telling me, "No, you're talking nonsense," and I realize suddenly that he's right. And so he has the right to contradict me. And so it's very important for us to see that a young person who lives in a country at war is doing fine. And I'm thinking, how can you be doing well? And they're smiling, and that makes me really happy to see those stories and seeing those kids.
Je crois qu'on a débordé. Il y avait une dernière question, mais j'ai un peu envie de dire que c'était la plus belle conclusion possible. Alors,
so there's one last question, if it's essential, crucial, because we're lagging behind a bit. Okay, no, right. So thank you, Nailem. Thank you for those words of conclusion. Thank you, everyone.
Voilà, donc c'est la fin de ce colloque. On va maintenant accueillir Michel.
It's the end of this conference. We're going to welcome Michel Antoine, the director of exhibitions at Universcience. She's coming on stage so that we can conclude this beautiful day.
Non, je sais que vous êtes tous fatigués. Je vais essayer d'être le plus bref possible.
I know you're all tired, so I'll try and be brief. And this is almost impossible to speak after everything that has been said. I feel a little bit at a loss, and I feel like I don't have the right words for it. I was asked to conclude the conference, and to summarize the conference. Both are absolutely impossible. So for the summary, look at my notes. It's chaotic. I've added words every 5 minutes to try and interpret what has been said today. And a conclusion doesn't really correspond to what happened today, because it imposes a limit and ending. And we have seen that when we talk about children, it's extremely cross-cutting. It's breaking the borders. And even you in the audience, you're extremely diverse. You have people who are creating performances, visual artists, people from museums, libraries, experts in early childhood, in Cité. So a very broad diversity that is breaking all obstacles. We have invited sociologists, and I'm going to name them: Julien Vitores and Cora Cohen-Azria, who have helped us bringing some nuance on all the prejudice, the misconceptions that we have on childhood, and they're very often due to the myths that we have heard in early childhood. So we've questioned, we've challenged, we've put all those preconceived ideas into perspective so that we can multiply points of view. The past 2 days for us at Universcience, and we hope for you too, who attended those 2 days, it was extremely refreshing, and it helped us think outside the box. It helped us question our practices in a joyful way. And we did it through many examples. As I said, it was an impossible summary for me, so I'll just use the title of the conference. The conference showed me that we had it all wrong. The title is rubbish. Well, it's good to realize it afterwards. It didn't prevent you from coming, so that's slightly reassuring, but it's going to be a way of remembering what we have said. We've talked about children. So from the second presentation on, we have understood that this was too much of a restrictive term, and we weren't talking about children, but rather a multitude of singularities that are reacting differently depending on ages, locations, conditions in which we are creating with children, talking to children. So it's necessary that we change the precision of our viewpoint so that we can multiply the proposals that we're making to them, multiplying authentic approaches and cultivate the diversity of stories. Of course, I have loved the idea of a plurality, a diversity of stories that we can tell. Children, we've got it all wrong by focusing on children because, as it turned out, in every discussion, we realize that when we speak about children, we speak about the people who are accompanying them. When we speak about children, we speak about adults. So there's a sort of co-fertilization of one group from the other without being able to identify where it started, where it ended, where the dynamic ended. This co-fertilization shouldn't prevent us from remembering where the responsibility lies. So yes, there is a responsibility. We need to deserve the trust that they're entrusting us with, and that's how we might be able to work with children in a correct manner. And of course, I'm going to talk about all the co-design discussions that took place, and I think that we all grew older from it. Growing up is a bit of an empty word. Words that can mean many different, can have many different meanings, and we feel that when we use this word, that it just happens very naturally, as if it was a plant growing when you pour water on it. But that's not how it happens. We just don't want them to just grow up. And Brune has translated in a very original manner the word empowerment, empouvoirment in French, and actually great, because usually we used another translation, capacitation, which is not very nice. And so with empouvoirment, it added a hint of magic. And again, the last discussion warned us on the use of the word power. Usually when you talk about power, there's a power balance that is involved, and I prefer the word puissance, which is the same translation into English, power. So I'd say that we need to cultivate this power to increase this power as an audience, our own power, so that we are more present in the world, so that we can continue to be astonished. Astonishment that is used instead of curiosity was quite interesting as well, because curiosity is now used very regularly. So it's a way of creating our own present and our own future, a way of being dynamic. And this is how I perceive our role to help growing. And our discussions have helped us think about our role, remain humble when we consider that we must help children grow. And actually they are directly involved in this process of growing up. Culture, well, the role of culture as you've noticed, we have gone beyond the role of culture in our debates. We've talked about education, school, policy, politics, and the limits, the borders between those different fields are much more permeable nowadays between culture, politics, and that's better this way. And so I'm taking the risk of suggesting a monstrous title, but that might be a better summary of what we have done, built together today. And so this will become: how can children and adults co-develop their cultural DNA so that they can multiply their desire and their power to act? I feel that that could be a good summary, but of course, as you've understood, to help children grow up, it's more attractive. As I said, I didn't want to conclude this conference because I don't want it to have an end. There's no reason for it to end. We've started a discussion amongst each other with you, and maybe not enough interactions with you. So here you've got a contact, an email address you can use so that you can send your feedback, your opinion about the conference, the question you wanted to ask that you should have asked. And I don't have a specific suggestion on the format of this interaction, but we thought that maybe we had planted a seed and that maybe we can do something about it. There will be recordings available. The introduction presentations, you can find them on our website. We've recorded it all. We did it a little bit without knowing what we were going to do with it, but we were certain, considering the people we were inviting, we considered that it was going to be fascinating. And this raw material exists. And so that's also an invite to think. And once again, you've got an email address to exchange with us. So it's an invitation to think about what we have talked about in the past 2 days and make it evolve, grow. As I said, I'm going to be brief. But before we leave, I'd like to thank some people. First of all, I'd like to thank Brune Bottero from the bottom of my heart. She did an amazing work. She has been fully engaged in the organization of those 2 days. She's suggested lots of new ideas. She suggested the intervention of our guests, our 3 guests who were recorded. So that was Brune's idea. She gave pace, rhythm to those 2 days. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the technical staff. We never talk about them, but it might come across as very simple, but thank you to the Univers Sciences technical staff for their work. Well done. Congratulations. I'd like to help I would like to name the 2 people who took care of the organization of those 2 days. Lisa, she's hating me for naming her. Margot, same. And I don't know if Flora is in the room. Flora is not in the room, but she also deserves this. They're the kingpins of those 2 days. They've passed on the microphone, but they've done much more than this. They've truly built those 2 days, thinking about the themes, finding the speakers, convincing them to intervene. They agreed. And then making sure that it was all very simple and the logistics were very simple. It was an enormous amount of time and work.
Merci à vous. J'espère que vous repartez plein d'idées.
Thank you, the audience, and to make the most of our museum, of our spaces, and come back soon. Bye.